Hello to all the participants and welcome to ICLEI's City Resilience Stories webinar series. This is a monthly space for cities and the urban resilience community to share their experiences on topical issues through a virtual encounter. My name is Victoria Vital Estrada. I'm Resilient Development Program Officer at ICLEI's World Secretariat. And today's webinar is Shaping a Resilient Post-COVID-19 Urban Era with Nature and Effective Planning in Africa. What have African cities done that supports long-term resilience building? Do these interventions help cities recover from the global COVID-19 pandemic? And what can we learn? I want to welcome Martina Otto, Head of Cities and Lifestyles at the UN Environment Program, who will be moderating this webinar. Thanks for being with us today, Martina. I leave the floor to you.
Okay, I'm unmuted. Thank you very much for this introduction. Good afternoon to everybody. Also from my side, a very warm welcome to this webinar, City Resilience Stories, Shaping a Resilient Post-COVID-19 Urban Era with Nature and Effective Planning in Africa. I'm Martina Otto. I'm heading the UN Environment Program's work on cities. And this we do take a 3D and investing in nature approach. 3D stands for decarbonizing, decoupling, and detoxifying. And we essentially deliver on this agenda in partnership. And as we look back to a long-standing cooperation with ICLEI, we just launched today our Joining the Cities with Nature effort. I'm very glad to be the moderator of the session taking place as we celebrate World Environment Day with the theme Time for Nature. So happy World Environment Day. COVID-19 pandemic is a sad reminder of the importance of nature. Foods we eat, the air we breathe, the water we drink, and the climate that makes our planet habitable all come from nature. To care for ourselves, we must care for nature. It is time to take notice, and it is time to build back better for people and the planet. We recognize that we will think already about building back better. For many, we're still in the thick of the crisis, and it is likely that the new normal means that we will need to learn to live with this virus. But that means as well that it is ever more important to build resilience, to change our economies, our consumption and production patterns, and not last to rethink urban design to allow us to better withstand and bounce back at times of crisis. Cities are at the front line when it comes to major emergencies, be it the present pandemic, natural disasters, or climate change. And cities are closest to citizens. They're responsible for much of the basic infrastructure, essential for our health and well-being. But often the means are not commensurate with the challenge. Current crisis taught us sadly once again that it hits harder if we're not prepared, and that existing vulnerabilities and inequalities are further exacerbated. So again, a strong call for building resilience. It also taught us that solidarity and cooperation are key to overcome crisis, and this includes national and subnational governments working hand in hand and community action playing a center stage. If we put our forces together, we can address big issues. Nature, resilience, solidarity are the three key big lessons to guide us in going forward. And cities do have a long tradition of reinventing themselves, drawing on their innovation capacity, their human capital. Cities like Paris and London were largely restructured due to tuberculosis and cholera outbreaks with elaborate sewage systems put in place as a response. Cities like Detroit or Essen have reinvented themselves. Essen turned from a challenging industrial history to a 2017 European green capital. Detroit recovered from economic downturn to a vibrant open laboratory, oh my God, for urban reinvention. And in African cities, we're facing multiple crises. Over half of the urban Africans live in informal neighborhoods where vulnerable conditions persist, lack of access to basic services and overcrowding, all making frequent hand washing, physical distancing and isolation at home harder to comply with. In looking for responses, we must keep the African urban landscapes in mind. And obviously there's everything from megacities that are growing at much higher rates than planning can cope with, to a vast web of small and medium-sized cities, often with too few response capacity, very urban sprawl, and huge disparities between neighborhoods within the same city. We've seen innovative actions for the immediate in a context where lockdowns are not sustainable in poor urban settings and bring struggles to survive with mobile cash transfers to vulnerable citizens. Municipalities permitting informal markets, supplying the needed food, providing more room for spreading out vendor stalls to keep up with distancing, or public health messaging that is based on creativity and culture, with, for example, coronavirus awareness songs that have made the globe actually being viewed by millions. This is not the first time a pandemic has hit the African cities. There are lessons and processes in place for responses to other crises. Gareth Morgan, Cape Town's Director for Resilience, called it the crisis muscle memory, which I found very, very good as an expression, because a lot of the same planners who worked on drought response are now dealing with COVID-19 and use similar tools. And just as response mechanisms are connected, the different crises are as well. And there is an interaction or an interconnection between health, emergence, and the spread of zoonotic diseases. Studies indicate that where native biodiversity is high, infection rates are lower. Conversely, a high degree of habitat destruction and fragmentation can increase the transmission. Beyond this direct health impact, when cities care for natural habitat within or around them, ecosystems provide additional services such as the reduction of heat island effects, flood control, recreation space, and purification of the air, all really critical. Planning will be playing an important role going forward, and COVID-19 calls for a paradigm shift in urban planning with a much stronger focus on interconnected but more self-sufficient neighborhoods where nature is closer to citizens. We need to think grey infrastructure in connection with blue and green as we roll out our stimulus packages and attempt to repurpose existing funding programs, loans, and grants. So now let me turn to our distinguished panel to learn how we can make the transition to healthier, greener cities. And we do have 5 very distinguished speakers on the webinar who represent local and subnational governments in Africa, from Kisumu County in Kenya to Tanzania and Entebbe in Uganda, as well as the ICLEI Africa team in South Africa. We will look for inspiration by learning from the actions taken and telling the stories of success, but also struggles and challenges and how they're being overcome is a very powerful way to enhance action. After the panel, we'll have a bit of time for discussion. Please prepare your questions and share them in the chat box. You'll find the link at the sidebar, we look forward to a very vibrant exchange. So now it's not only time for nature, but it's also time to give the floor to our first speaker. If we could change the slide to the overview of our 5 speakers. Already mentioned in flowing over the diversity of experience that we will hear about. And our first speaker is Dr. Ali Namangaya. He's the Dean of Spatial Planning and Social Sciences, RD University in Tanzania. He holds a PhD in spatial planning. His areas of expertise are natural resources management, amongst many other things. And he has extensively published in peer-reviewed journals in areas of natural resource conservation, urban planning, and local development. And he'll talk to us on how effective urban planning practices can contribute to reduce disaster risk and enhance resilience in African cities. So with that, you have the floor. Thank you.
Okay, hello, thank you. Thank you for having me, and thank you for kind introduction. I would like to start by picking up from where the moderator has spoken about, that is the context at which African cities are facing, and as it says, we're talking about planning, and when you look at the context, you see that actually planning is really marginalized. I'm giving an example of Dar es Salaam here, and I'm saying the all yellow spots in the city are unplanned areas in some sort. So actually the planned part is actually the marginalized part, and you have got a very serious problem of housing development in peri-urban areas, and a lack of development control, and as a result, you have got problems of floods, problem of all sorts of disasters, and the risks and the vulnerability that societies are facing. And then the government capacity to solve these issues is really, really limited. So this is a context of planning, and we talk of planning, but then the only little percentage of the cities have really been successful being planned, and they have a mechanism to allow, as you said, social distance aspects, issues like contact tracing and sort of thing are really, they've become very difficult in such a context. And when you look into, to speak freely, what are the ideas and issues? If you have ever traveled Dar es Salaam, you will find something interesting, that you have an empty land in middle of the city, and when you look at it, it's one of the wasteland, we call it Jangwani. But when you look at this, the place is just flooded and sort of thing. But recently there was an attempt to control floods, because there's a big floods that are affecting a lot of the city. And when the attempt was made in the planning, you could see that there were over 28 actors you had to deal with in that waste-like land which you have to deal with. So this is a biggest. It's no longer about design. It's not about. It's really serious stakes and serious actors which we have to coordinate, and they have different power and mandate, and they also the problems we are facing: climate change, erosion, sedimentation, pollutions, and but then when you look at it on the surface, you see like it's a planning mandate, but then the meaning of planning becomes challenging. And this was one of successful projects that looked upon a wasteland turned into a green area, and you had to engage using charity over 30 institutions, and as a result, we had developed new institutions that have supported a lot in the COVID-19 issues, like DAMAT and TAP, which gave warning signs and sort of thing. But these institutions were developed for resilience, flood resilience, but they have also helped in dealing with the resilience with COVID-19 through information and sort of sharing. The other thing I wanted to share is we have a serious aspect of realism in planning. We had certain planning standards and the ideas of the neighborhoods. And what I'm showing here is an example of well-planned neighborhood, which should be poshy, and we would have expected this place to be free from disasters, free from particularly floods, because it was well planned and very recent. But in reality, it's one of the most affected areas by floods. You have got public buildings and flood-prone areas. So yes, we sometimes have a planning, but then the planning is not structured in a context where we have a proper analysis, we have a proper understanding. We don't have a really good framework for protecting rivers, wildlife, and agricultural lands. We are realizing that actually we need to really turn planning to relook the standards and the effects. And this brings me to what I think is a conclusion from the study which we did on upgrading planning instruments, legal instruments in Tanzania. And because of the study, we found, first, we have good laws, and they say something about conserving the environment. They say something about analysis of the nature and the biodiversity, but they don't use the direct language of which could be used to mainstream climate change and adaptation. We say, so it requires your interpretation, and in the dire need we have, I think it's important to have planning instruments that are saying straight. They are quite straight on that. The second aspect, I think, is what I've said. We have different contexts from our theories. The context of informality, context of urbanization and poverty, and the context of climate change itself. And so as a result, I think most of our projects we have planned in different theoretical concepts, and we think it's important to be realistic and to know that probably we are taking different development paths, might not be exactly similar to the one taken by the West. The other thing I think is the aspect of development control. We again expected the government to do development control, to have information and sort of thing, but the reality is we don't have those instruments, and probably we need to use other pseudo-formal instruments to have development control. Otherwise, I will close up by underlying the aspect of technology in the ICT. I think there's a lot of room. And there's like a Resilience Academy in Tanzania, you have open street mapping. They are really good instruments which we could enhance drone mapping, enhance our information, and therefore make planning more effective. And I think this is one area which Tanzania is doing very well, and I think most of the countries in the world in the African region are doing well, but I think there's big potential for enhancing planning and the coordination and everything through use of ICT. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Very interesting what you shared with us, and really critically important. When I look at the few notes that I took, number one, highlighting the importance of also the nature-based solutions, importance of coordination, the challenges that come with it, but means at the same time you have a support group as well. And as you said, this can actually work for different contexts. Designed for one challenge, it can help with dealing with another one. And then looking at the multiple benefits, looking at some of the challenges as well. And I think the point that you made about ICT will come back again and again, as well as for homemade, home-cooked solutions as well. And as we have seen many examples of amazing innovation capacity, there will be opportunities going forward. So I think that's super interesting as a starting point for us. We will go to our next speaker, who is Mr. Salmon Orimba from Kisumu County. He's the executive for water, environment, natural resources, and climate change. So Kisumu, Kenya, and he oversees environmental and climate change work, working closely with the city of Kisumu for coordinated response for building urban resilience, and obviously multi-level governance is critically important. So we look forward to hearing more about the lessons and challenges and opportunities from your perspective that supports long-term resilience building as well as recovery from COVID-19 pandemic. The floor is yours. We do see your slide, but we can't hear you very well. I don't know whether you're already speaking.
Thank you. I'm happy to present to you Kisumu City in Kenya, the resilience building as a city within Africa. Kisumu City is the third largest city in Kenya. We are found down right into the far end of Lake Victoria that is shared between three countries. We have a city that is very much well positioned to have its challenges, opportunities, and lessons to share. Within my presentation, I want to talk about my city. That is my responsibility. What achievement have we made within Kisumu City? What achievement we've made within Kisumu City? We have a disaster risk management plan, County Disaster Management Act, County Integrated Development Plan that is inclusive of disaster risk reduction mainstreaming in place, local government self-assessment tool, training and reporting conducted with stakeholders. We have local government self-assessment tool. We conduct participation in global disaster risk management platform for experience sharing and benchmarking. Establishment of an emergency wing in the district hospital. We have a new modern firefighting station constructed and funded by the World Bank and urban development support program. Maritime ambulance and marine patrol boats are in existence. You just see what happens within the lake. And we do continuous and capacity building. What challenges do we have? Just like any other city within Africa. We have challenges that ranges from urbanization, the pressure put on our land due to migration from the rural to urban center, and safe work. This has resulted in unsafe work conditions. Poor urban planning, inadequate infrastructure for disaster management, over-reliance on resource for disaster management, from the local government and the national government, lack of fiscal and human resource at county level, followed by the unclear mandate of disaster reduction, inadequate water resource management, drainage systems, solid waste management, causing health hazards and emergency during flooding due to climate change, declining ecosystem due to human activities and wetland encroachment, road construction affecting flood regulations. What opportunities exist within Kisumu? Devolution is a good thing to our city, because we can now get the resources directly from the national government for development on prioritized issues. We have opportunity from development partners who come and share and invest within Kisumu. Stakeholders and political goodwill exist within Kisumu City. Strategic geographical location that enhances potential for development, because we stand squarely at the lake that houses 3-4 countries with a population of close to 50 million people. And the ongoing county special plan, which places Kisumu at a strategic position to plan well its functions and activities, how and what will sit where, and how we want to conserve our natural resources. What lessons can be learned from our city? That Africa needs to enactment of disaster management laws, policies, and procedures. City to city benchmarking and sharing of our best studies, case studies, technical support, resource mobilization, and capacity building. In conclusion, disaster risk reduction is key for sustainable development for our city. The city of Kisumu is working towards achieving city disaster resilience status. The growing influence of Kisumu as a regional economic bloc has given the impetus to focus on the disaster risk reduction. Devolution is a key driver for disaster risk reduction. for our city. Thank you and be blessed.
Martina, over to you again. Thank you. Martina, could you try to unmute yourself, please?
Okay. So I've been
Thank you.
talking to myself. Okay. I couldn't in the first
No
place,
worries.
and I had understood you had unmuted me. Okay, sorry for that. So now we would, I won't repeat what I just said, but I want to give the floor to Mayor Vincent Kayanya. He is the mayor of Entebbe Municipal Council, Uganda, and he's also the chairman of Lake Victoria Regional Local Authorities and Counties Corporation, covering local authorities working in the Lake Victoria Basin in Uganda, Kenya, and Tanzania. And he'll talk to us about the role that African municipalities can take to lead and shape a resilient future post-COVID-19. And the floor is yours, Honorable Mayor.
My name is Semakula Samson. I'm from Entebbe Municipal Council. I'm the agriculture officer, but also the desk officer for ICLEI. I'm representing the mayor of Entebbe, who is out at the moment. We were asked to talk about the resilience of Entebbe post-COVID-19. And in Entebbe, we have tried to reserve some funds for such situations so that we can, even under a lockdown, we can still do some critical services like waste management and the health, security, such activities. And also, we have tried to maintain critical staff. That is because we are over 100 staff, and most of them were asked to stay at home. But we had to keep like 20 staff at the station. And these 20 staff are usually multitaskers who can do one or more roles at the same time. So we need to, so during the normal times, we must train people to be multitaskers. They can do more than one thing maybe not only their professional roles, but they must be able to do some other roles, like they can drive, they can do first aid, they can fix a pump and something like that. So, and also we minimized capital developments. So the budget that were meant for things like roads, buildings were all stopped, and all the money was kept aside to try and address COVID-related issues. Next slide, please. Then on the essential services side, like I've said, we kept around the multitaskers, the staff who can do more than one role. And also we have tried to keep them and the other staff who are not coming to the office, we have tried to keep them connected to us by having access to internet, for instance, and telephone. So they are on internet all the time so that they can even provide services without necessarily coming to the office. And also, as a municipality, we have tried to make sure that the community accesses water all through the time. Though the people are being billed for the water they're using, but they cannot be disconnected for non-payment. This is to ensure that they keep clean, and washing is kept going so that people don't miss water, so they can't wash their hands. And since the virus is transmitted by mainly the hands, we want to ensure that they keep their hands clean all the time. So water is being accessed even without payment, and they'll pay for the bills later on when the problem is under control. Next slide, please. Then we are also at the moment we are seeing the benefit of our urban natural assets. For instance, our outdoor spaces. We are lucky that we don't build a lot of high-rise buildings, so people have a lot of green space around their houses. So even if they are under lockdown, they can at least go outside in their compounds and get fresh air and look at the natural vegetation, which is also helpful in such times. So our outdoor space has also been very critical to our community. Next slide, please. We have also, because food was an issue and people had to have food all the time, so the municipal council has come in to give out food rations to people living in the community, especially the most vulnerable, the old, the sick, the unemployed. So we've been giving out maize flour and beans, basically, and some milk to the mothers of young children, so that they don't die of hunger. And this has been done by the municipal council, collecting foodstuffs from well-wishers and also committing a budget to purchase some of this food, which we give out to people because they are locked out in their houses. They are going to die of hunger. And also from the government level, they have allowed trucks transporting foodstuff to keep moving even in the night, so that they can bring in food all the time as much as possible. So despite the fact that we have a curfew at 7 p.m., the trucks delivering foodstuff, they move up to morning, 24 hours. They can move through the day and through the night, so that people have food to eat during this period. I thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Timothy Blatch from ICLEI Africa, and I just wanted to share some top lessons. This was a slide we received on behalf of Honorable Mayor Kayanja after the recording had taken place. So we wanted to just share with you some of the key lessons coming out of the experience of Entebbe. And that's that in order to build resilience, the city needs flexible systems that are easily adaptable, and policies and plans and decision-making that support these systems, as well as an increased focus on infrastructure, both soft and hard. The city has touched on the importance of its urban natural assets, but also hard things like laptops and data packages. We're increasingly seeing how ICT and access to data is becoming important, especially in these COVID-19 times. Another key lesson is that we need more research into why Africa is not as hard hit by the pandemic. And perhaps this is a case of testing, etc. But we need to really delve into understanding this issue more, as well as the issue of reserving funds, which is very complicated in the case of Entebbe. And we need better processes and mechanisms for accessing financial resources in times of crisis. This is key to building the resilience of the city. And then nature-based solutions, of course. The city has done much work on its urban natural assets, and has realized that one of the top lessons in building a resilient future, both during and after the pandemic, lies with nature at its center. And finally, the last lesson I'd like to share is that the city is needing more support for its food programs, and this support, to focus on transportation and the linkages between farm to table, and support for its various food distribution mechanisms. So thank you, and I will hand back over to the moderator.
Okay, thank you. This time I'm already unmuted, so thanks very much for these insights. Now something happened to my screen, which is fantastic. And I don't see anymore. Okay, webcam. I hope you can see me now. It's a bit of a challenge, I have to say. GoTo is much less user-friendly than a number of the other systems, and it's either I see what is happening on the screen or anyway. Apologies for that. We now turn to the ICLEI team, and we will hear from Jessica Vonich. She's a senior professional officer dealing with climate change and the urban natural assets at ICLEI Africa. She has a background in atmospheric science with a more specialized knowledge of climate change and its relationships with a sustainable approach to development. And we'll hear about the learnings from the Urban Natural Assets Program. What have these cities done that supports long-term resilience building, and do these interventions help cities recover from the global COVID-19 pandemic? The floor is yours.
Great. I hope that you can all see my screen. So thanks so much, Martina. And as discussed, I'm going to be presenting on the Urban Natural Assets for Africa program. So as a very quick introduction to what the UNO program is, it is about trying to integrate nature and nature-based solutions into land use planning for increased climate resilience. We work in 9 African cities across the continent, and our footprint is quite a bit larger than those 6 cities because of the African network and supporting a large border network. And so it's quite difficult to consolidate work in 9 African cities, also because this program's been running for 6 years. But I am going to try and do it justice to explain what we've been doing and what those cities have been doing to build resilience, and how that is improving the resilience to be able to deal with post-pandemic future. And so in order to try and consolidate it, I have divided the way that we've been building resilience into 5 kind of key areas. So the first one is that the program has really focused on building enabled systems. So this is by prioritizing co-production and transdisciplinary processes to really try and advance mainstreaming in practice. So the program has taken the stance that by just developing information and presenting it to cities and city councils, it's not enough to generate really good transformative change. You need to really come together and learn together, build knowledge together, and as a result, co-create those entry points. And by co-creating those entry points, things like nature and nature-based solutions are much easily able to be mainstreamed into decision processes because they be created together. And this program has very much focused on that, and we can see the results of these in our different cities. The second kind of, so this program has really tried to focus on enabling institutional cultural transformation in the different African cities. So it's really tried to create more champions that are advocacy for climate solutions, for nature-based solutions, and really see the value of those and drive those forward in the systems that cities operate within. So linked to that is building capacity. So the program has built capacity of over 2,000 African stakeholders across the continent, and we've complemented this through providing appropriate natural asset information to decision making. So that's through learning exchanges, through networking, but also through providing information such as on the right-hand side is a map, which I will go into a little bit more detail of what that is in the later slide. We've also spent quite a lot of time with the cities trying to localize international frameworks. So Sendai framework, Paris Agreement, and now the new biodiversity agenda. Really understanding that those are kind of best practices that should lead cities. And as cities are now very much integrated into all those frameworks, is trying to localize those frameworks and then also providing the platform for those lessons that are on the ground, really hard-hitting things that are coming out of local governments to then feed back up into these international processes to try and create this synergy of flow of information from national, local, and then up to the international space and back again. And lastly, acknowledging that Africa is extremely unique, particularly around the urbanization rates. Informality, as Dr. Namangaya spoke about earlier, is a real reality in African cities. And so we need effective methods to plan, effective methods to really integrate nature-based solutions in that space of rapidly changing dynamic of African cities, where urban sprawl and informality is really real. And so this program has really started to try and test new approaches and new methods to be able to plan effectively, to have nature-based solutions really being used as a means to build resilient cities. And all 9 of our program cities, we're really starting to see this experimental nature coming through in decision making, which is wonderful to see, and we believe is very important in building resilient cities. So to sum up all those little interventions or big interventions that we've been doing in the cities, and who I must say the cities have really owned themselves. This program really is about cities' needs being met, and city context is driving these needs. And so the cities are the lead in generating and driving all those interventions I've spoken about. So do we see these helping our cities recover in global pandemic or when they're faced with shocks and changes? And the answer is yes, we really do. We've seen that nature-based solutions and nature considerations are now really an integral part of decision-making in all of those African cities. And this is important because we know so much research around why nature-based solutions and why nature are instrumental in addressing global societal challenges, because health, economic stability, and nature are really interconnected. And so those 9 cities that are really pioneering, paving the way for nature-based solutions incorporated decision-making are in a better position to be able to deal with these shocks and changes that are coming. Through the process and the program supporting enabled people, system, and then tailored approaches, these go a long way to helping cities have these more flexible and adaptive policies. And we're seeing again that this is really great in these times of need, because your cities are able to kind of come together and learn and reflect together, and these adaptive processes really do support that. The fact that the information is also at their fingertips allowed for more informed decisions. So using the example of the map that I said I'd come back to, this is a map that was created with the Lilongwe City Council to kind of outline what their key priority areas for urban natural assets are in the city. So all those red areas are areas that if those natural assets get removed from those areas, the city's resilience will be highly compromised. And at the moment, these cities are really trying to use this map as a decision-making tool to guide and use these spaces, bringing back nature into those high priority areas to really guide development and to guide how they build resilience. So now they've gone from reactive planning to really proactive planning, which is very important in times like we're facing. And finally, linking to international frameworks to guide decision-making really puts cities at a better position, and also the ability for their lessons to then feedback puts the world at a better position. So it's really act local, think global, and act local really to the forefront, and again positions them in a much better position to be able to deal with COVID and just build longer-term resilience. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jess. Very interesting program with a couple of very powerful messages that you brought to us. And With this, I would like to turn to Kobe for the wrap-up. So we'll have Ms. Kobe Brand. She is the Regional Director, ICLEI Africa, and the Global Director, ICLEI Cities Biodiversity Center. And she has more than 25 years of practical and managerial experience in environmental management and urban development. And I think everybody on the call knows her as well. So no further introduction. And Kobe, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Martina, and thank you for demonstrating in action our partnership between ICLEI and UNEP so well by moderating this session for us today on World Environment Day, which I know is for UNEP a very, very busy day, and for you as well. So we really appreciate you taking time out to be with us for this hour. Thank you so much. It's very much appreciated, especially today, as you say, the day on which we are even deepening our partnership between ICLEI and UNEP in the initiative Cities with Nature, which is bringing all cities around the world together who are at the forefront of tackling the cumulative development issues that we've heard all these mayors and leaders speak about today, and finding solutions and tracking their own progress and commitments together. So UNEP, very welcome on board Cities with Nature, but also very welcome, Martina, for you to be here with us. So yeah, I've got so many takeouts from these very rich engagements, and one of the first ones that really hit home to me was when we heard Mayor Kanya speaking about or his representative speaking on his behalf about the need for ongoing services, essential services such as water supply. And this during a time where you can imagine that there will be very little revenue or income coming from residents. In a time of crisis like this, you would see even in the most developed countries, the numbers of people going for support, social benefit support and grants and so on. It's just staggering if you look at the numbers coming out of the US, etc. The most developed economies in the world. So you can imagine that for cities the world over, and particularly also in Africa, where there is already a problem of income from services and rates and taxes, this will be exacerbated. So cities are going to go into a new normal and having to rebuild and build better and build differently the city that we want and the city that the planet and people deserve, with a lot less funding coming their way for the services or from the traditional resources that they used to get from residents, etc. So it's altogether a new reality, and there will have to be a completely different way of thinking about how cities are going to continue providing services for their communities in times of need, but also in what we see is going to be a very difficult economic environment for the next couple of years. Already our cities in Africa are under-resourced. Our infrastructure is frail. It needs not only expansion, but it needs pure basic maintenance as well, quite direly so. We've got water shortages all across the continent. We've got flooding. We've got our normal issues around climate change and nature pressures that we see all over the continent, and exacerbated by that is also the pressures of urbanization that is leading cities to having to massively expand quite rapidly. So Jessica, hats off to you. I know you and the team working on the UNA project and the many cities, Kisumu, Dar es Salaam, Entebbe, all three that are presented here are involved in the project, but many more are benefiting from this project. And yes, you're working under very difficult conditions, hand in hand with these mayors, tailor-made approaches for each of them. And it is only in that way, in the way that you really go down to the ground level and trying to find those solutions within the local context, that you can actually implement any global agreement, any global goal. The SDGs are not going to be moved forward. They're not going to be addressed in the next decade, which is dubbed by the UN as the decade of action, if it's not on the ground and within the local context and with the whole of the local community, whole of society approach coming in behind the work of the mayors. And then also, I think a second takeaway for me really is about the leadership at local level. It is these mayors that are standing strong in the face of a pandemic like this. These mayors' doors remain open. They remain talking to their communities. They are out there in the streets. They are busy. They're working around the clock, because it's there at that local level where people want services, where people are in need, where people need care, they need food, they need all these basic services and so much more during a time of crisis. Solidarity and being there for them. That's the true leadership we see from mayors like Mayor Kahanya and so many others around the African continent. It's a spirit of Ubuntu, which is so part of Africa and which combines us all so deeply on this continent, which is going to see us through this pandemic and probably also even worse crises coming our way. If we look at what the climate scientists and other scientists are telling us about the natural habitat destruction and the other issues that are facing the climate, the planet at the moment. So yeah, those were some of my initial thoughts. But what an enriching experience to really see how three very different cities, three very different countries have so much in common right now in the face of the pandemic.
Thank you very much, Kobe. Very well put. Fully agree with you. And it's pretty impressive on the one side, what has been done already, and obviously the size of the challenge ahead of us. We do have a couple of questions that did come in. We have very little time, but I suggest we use them for the questions. And there's the first one for Ali. Do you monitor on the indicators of the SDGs and especially SDG 11 for your urban planning projects? How do you make sure that works efficiently in your context? So that's the first question. Monitoring of the indicators of the SDGs and particularly SDG 11.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. Thank you very much for whoever has asked the question. And I think it's the answer would be yes and no. Yes, because generally we have sector-specific monitoring. That means people who are dealing with the water, dealing with their respective monitoring systems, those who are dealing with the environment, those dealing with the health issues. So we have got sector monitoring systems, which they use the same indicator SDG, and they have got regular monitoring, regular reporting, at least in the national level. But being comprehensive institution that is reporting on the progress of SDG, I think that is really missing. And since these SDG are somehow interlinked, you fail to get the comprehensive picture, especially when you are dealing with SDG 11, because you need a comprehensive understanding of what is happening in the city, the nature, the health, the education, and everything comes into play. And there had been earlier an attempt under TASINI, Tanzania State of the Cities Network, where we really developed comprehensive indicators for monitoring city achievements and the progress in some indicators. And I think it went for 5 years or so, but I think lacked funding and sort of understanding. Then the cities network, which was actually a collection of mayors and the city directors on their own reporting, failed to progress and to have sustainable means. And I think from there, we don't have a comprehensive city level, national level, city-wise monitoring of SDG 11 particularly, although we could see here and there reporting in the structures. This is really weakness and deficiency in the system.
Okay, excellent. Thank you so much. We have another question, which is a bit more open, doesn't specify to whom. How much does educating the local community play in your environmental resiliency efforts? Whoever would like to take that one on. Education of local community.
I'm happy to take it on unless someone else wants. But yeah, the quick answer is huge. So just in terms of the maps, those priority maps that we developed, this was an intensive co-production process which lasted about 18 months. And we really tried to engage the community as much as possible, purely because, you know, sometimes decision making and all the rest of it and power dynamics can come into play. So we wanted the community to be active, almost like champions of those areas that were listed as high priority or medium priority, so that if they were threatened, the community could be actively involved in protecting those areas as well that had been defined. And so we spent a huge amount of time working with communities, particularly around the priority and medium priority. And then also on another thing, which about those localizing those international frameworks. So a large amount of work went on the ground change. So the one picture in my presentation was actually Addis Ababa, which has developed an urban river park now in the center of Addis. And it was also, again, spent about 18 months just working with the community and getting their local knowledge into that plan. And creating awareness and making sure that local knowledge was embedded, but also developing things like helping them develop business cases and doing CVs and things like that to really empower the community so that they can be active participants at that site. So we do spend a huge amount of time educating communities.
Okay, cool, excellent. Thank you, Jess. There was another question for you, maybe a really short answer. What methodology, of course you can't do justice to the full breadth of the question, but what methodology was used to create the UNI priority hotspot maps, and what kind of geodata was overlaid?
Okay, the method, it was quite complicated, but again, very much co-creation process with the city council, with communities, with private, with academics involved to develop those. In terms of data that was used, an array, so flood risk data, temperature data for the city or for the region, also biodiversity, so what endangered species, also species counts, was tried to be integrated as much as possible. It is complicated because that data is hard to get in African cities, but it was tried. And then also policies and plans. So the city had already land use plans and land use maps. So it was tried to align that with those demarcations as much as possible. And then local knowledge, doing a lot of surveys and trying to include local knowledge in that.
Okay, excellent. Hey, thank you. And I think we all get price and speed talking. Really cool. With that, I think we come really to the close of this. Kobe had done such a nice job in summarizing a lot, so I only want to give a few highlights. And I think it's very clear nature plays a big role in our responses to crisis, and it's multiple crises. So it is on the one side our response to COVID-19, but it's also the response to climate and other crises coming our way, with serious impacts for health. There's this One Health sort of approach. So for healthy people, we need a healthy planet as well, and we have to work towards that. I think a very powerful message came for collaboration as well, and that on different levels. So this whole idea of co-creation, having a body that helps bring together different people who help with solutions, designing them and implementing them, that's absolutely critical. But also we've seen some examples of this cooperation between different levels of government that is super important as well. So I think there's a very interesting thread that was mentioned, and cooperation between different cities, where we heard that this peer-to-peer learning is so powerful and helps us in moving forward. Obviously, solutions are context specific, but by sharing solutions that people have tested and had success with, we can find inspiration. So it's not a one-on-one implementation of what has been done elsewhere, finding inspiration and making them work for themselves. We did focus on a number of sectors, and obviously food is a critical one with all the transport, logistics, and so on, but making a strong case as well for maybe more of those local supply chains and a stronger connection between rural and urban, so the city region connection. And I think I'll want to leave it with that. Oh yeah, ICT obviously was mentioned, that moving forward, on the one side we've seen this digital divide widening, and on the other side we've seen all the multitude of things, not only looking at this webinar that we have just done across different countries. So it's a powerful way of connecting and providing us with solutions. I think this is in a nutshell where we have landed, and I think I hand over back to ICLEI for a couple of last slides. So if you can bear with us for another minute or two. Thank you so much, and thank you for all the wonderful contributions, and all the best to everybody, and stay safe.
Thanks, Martina. This is Victoria again. Thanks to all the panelists again, to all of you for your valuable contributions and making some time on this important day. I want to say that we received some more questions from the audience. What we're gonna do is to share them with the speakers, hoping that they will have some time to answer to them in a written way, and we will post them next to the link with the recording of this webinar, which you can consult directly in the ICLEI City Resilience Stories webinar series in the webinars section of ICLEI's website. We've been collecting also a couple of COVID-19 resources addressed to local governments and other professionals in the field. We also share with you the ICLEI Africa COVID-19 resources and also the ICLEI Africa webinar series, Building Sustainable African Cities During and After the Pandemic, which is also a very interesting initiative that just started, and we're very happy to share this with you as well. We will also share the presentations of all the speakers next to the recording. And finally, we just want to cordially invite you to check out the Daring Cities 2020 event, which now is going online. This is the global virtual forum for urban leaders taking on the climate emergency. Really important right now, especially on how we're going to build this post-COVID-19 era also through sustainable and climate actions. So we invite you to check out the way to register and to be with us from the 7th to the 28th of October this year. Thank you very much, everyone, and stay tuned for the next webinars. Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.